Welcome back to our study called For Kingship Belongs to the Lord. And we're looking at Genesis chapter 14. Today we're looking at verses 13 through 16. And we're going to see Abram to the rescue. That's what we're talking about today. So in this section we have the only recorded military action of Abram in the Bible. We don't see him going into battle any other time. So this is the only time we see it. Now the contrast here is apparent. Why were the other kings fighting? They fought for wealth. They fought for power, right? They went into battle to gain these things or to regain these things. Really, the kings from the north were trying to regain what they had lost when the other kings banded together. So that's what they do. Now, Abram goes to war for his family to set the captives free. That's what he does. So he has no aspirations to take power or wealth for himself, but he only wants to save his nephew. That's it. That's his goal, get his nephew back. So godly men and women are moved to fight, not for the gain, for their own gain, but really to rescue others. That's why we fight. That's why we battle. That's why we fight against evil and the things that are going on in the world. Because we're moved to fight to rescue, not to gain power and wealth. But in verse 13, we see that one of the people from the area, probably Sodom, someone who knew Lot, came and told Abram what had happened to Lot. Did you notice that Abram was called Abram the Hebrew here? Now, why is that? Why is he called Abram the Hebrew? Moses is making it clear that though Abram was friends with Mamre and his brothers, and they were letting him live with them on their land, he was still a son of Eber. He was a foreigner and was sojourning in the land of the Amorites. That's what he was. He was not one of them. He had not joined up with them. Not like Lot is living in Sodom. It talks about how he's there. He's a resident there. Later on, we'll see him sitting in the gate, which means he's kind of a leader now in the city of Sodom. And so we get this contrast here between what Lot is doing and what Abram's doing. Abram might be living in the land. He might be aligned himself with these guys, this guy Mamre and his brothers, who are Amorites. But he's not an Amorite. He hasn't given in with them. He's still Hebrew. He is separate. He is with his family, going back to Eber there, the man of God in his family line. That's who he's identifying with, or has been identified by the Bible with. And so Moses is showing us here, there's two different things going on here with these guys. So when Abram learns of what happens to Lot, he gathers together the men that were in the house that had been trained to fight. Now, Abram has 318 men that are ready to go that are of fighting age. So when you're picturing Abram moving about in tents, you might be tempted to see a small tent. There's Abram, Sarai, and Lot in it. Later on, you get Hagar. So maybe there's like 4 people always living, or 3 people living there. There's a small group of people. But it's clear from this passage that this is not the case. Abram is sojourning in the land with really a small town. No wonder why the land couldn't support him in the last story, because they got so many people. I mean, you got 318 men that are of fighting age that have been trained to fight, that are dedicated to fighting, and so that's at least 318 people. He's got like a little town walking around with him. So when you picture the traveling Abram, picture multiple tents. I mean, this is a tent city he's got. And hundreds of people he's got with him. This is not just a little guy out there hanging out by himself in the middle of the wilderness. This is a little small town moving around, going to different places. When it talks about, calling upon the name of the Lord, I mean, he's got at least 318 men that are with him. Not to mention if they have children, wives. So, he could have 1,000 people with him. Who knows? So we're not given, so at least 318, right? So it's a big operation. I mean, you could have, if all those fighting men were married, I mean, you're pushing 700 already right there. So, all right. So Abram leads his men after Chedorlaomer. He goes after him, he defeats him, and then brings back with him all of the plunder, everything that those kings had taken. So he brings back the plunder, including all the people, of course. including Lot being one of those. So he accomplishes his mission. He does it. And with only 318 men, he does it. So this is obviously, one of those stories where it's like David and Goliath. Like David didn't defeat Goliath. It was the Lord. It was the Lord's battle. It wasn't him. Same kind of thing. Abraham takes 318, able to defeat these 4 kings, defeats Kedorlaomer, who had defeated the other 5 kings' army. So he's winning. So there's an interesting contrast here in chapter 13. So, there in that story, we were a little disappointed in Abram because as he followed his wife, he allowed his wife to be taken by the Pharaoh. But here he will not allow his nephew to be taken by the king. Is Abram's faith in God growing here? Could be. I think it is because, it's often easier to engage in a physical battle than it is to wait on the Lord, right? It's easier for us to get in there, duke it out with somebody, than it is to trust that the Lord will care for us. And so, different situation. I mean, you got, okay, let's go and fight those mobs. Yeah, let's go. That's easier to do than then say, well, I'm going to wait, God, for, decades for you to accomplish your purpose in my life. That's not always easy to do. Sometimes we just rather run ahead and then, there's the consequences. But it's easier for us sometimes just to go in there, physically fight with somebody than it is. But Abram's faith is growing, but this test might have been a little bit easier for him. God might have gave him up a little bit of a softball there and said, hey, okay, I know you failed at this one, but hey, try this. But Abram was victorious. Abram frees the captives, and along with his men, they carry back all the possessions that were stolen. This leads us to really the final scene of the story, which we'll look at next time.